Hi, I'm Shoma Chaudhury. Thank you for watching Inquiry. It's been a hectic week of elections in America and Bihar, so I'm really pleased to bring you an unusual interview about an intimate personal landscape rather than a global event. Javed Akhtar is a wonderful, mercurial, prodigious voice in India's public life. His intellectual positions are well known. He's a staunch atheist, a passionate secularist, and a witty and fierce voice against all religions. He recently won the Richard Dawkins Award for upholding rational values. I myself have sparred with Javed Saab many times about spirituality and faith. So this time, I was super keen to explore the making of his unique and brilliant mind. What follows are excerpts from a really intimate and exclusive interview about the people, circumstances, and ideas that have shaped him, from his parents to his legendary partnership with Salim Khan, his alcoholism, marriages, and his journey from being a magical but abandoned child to the superstardom of his adulthood. It might look like a long interview, but trust me, Javed Saab is utterly riveting and absolutely rewarding. So Javed Saab, we've been trying to meet and do this for many months, and you were awarded the Richard Dawkins Award by the Center of Inquiry. So it's great that you're finally on my show called Inquiry.
My pleasure.
So take me back to your childhood, Javed Saab. What was the milieu you grew up in? I believe you almost grew up with a very devout Islamic education.
Nothing could be further from the truth when you say that I was born in a devout Islamic atmosphere. I mean, nothing could be further from the truth. My parents were atheists. My father, my mother, they were atheists. They never taught me or my brother any religion. I never saw any religion as a matter. Yes, there was Eid, and we used to celebrate Eid, but my mother used to celebrate Janmashtami. My mother used to celebrate Christmas. My family used to celebrate Holi, Diwali, and particularly Janmashtami, because in Awadh, Janmashtami is very important. But that's about all. Our relationship with religion, or say religions, was through festivals. Otherwise, I was told by my father when perhaps I was 9 years old, 10 years old, that there is no God. All this religion is rubbish. Never get into these things. And I have, except for my Nana and Nani, my maternal grandmother and my maternal grandfather, I have not seen anybody in my family pray. But I must tell you this story, and it's a very important story. And I realized its gravity much later in my life. My mother died when I was 8 years old. You know, when we were in Bhopal, living in my parents' house, there was a huge picture of Stalin at home. And I must be 5 years old or 4 years old, maximum 6 years old, maximum. And I was genuinely convinced that this is my grandfather's picture. And Stalin is my grandfather. I was totally convinced about it. And however young I was, but someday it dawned upon me and somebody told me that it is not possible that Stalin could be your grandfather because your grandfather's name was Mustar Khairabadi. So how can you have Stalin as your grandfather? It dawned upon me that he is not. And little child was so disappointed and so demoralized that I remember that moment even today. I remember my disappointment. That, oh, so he's not my grandfather. It was a revelation. So my Nana and Nani used to pray 5 times a day, like any devout Muslim. My Nani was totally uneducated. She could not even write her name. She never spoke khari boli, tum kaise ho, aao khana khaoge, pani piyoge. No. Awat hai, jawat hai, hum kahin nu sunen. She used to speak only Awadhi. And I know Awadhi not because I have lived in a village ever. I know Awadhi thanks to my grandmother. And she was so devout that even that old lady, and she was very old, when she would be unwell and she would have high fever, that old lady would pray while lying down. And on the other hand, she had a servant whose job was to take Qawmi Awaz, which was the Urdu version of National Herald of that time. It was a very important paper. And he would bring the paper, sit near her feet. She would be on her bed. He would sit on a small mondha and read all the political news to her, and she would listen while cutting chalia. The whole newspaper, every day she used to listen, and politically, she was quite savvy and gave her opinion about politics in Awadhi. This lady saw to it that I don't get any religious education. This lady. When my mother died, I was 8 years old, and I was in my grandparents' house, Nana Nani. And my Nana once gave me one ayat of Quran. And he said that if you will mug it up, if you will buy heart it, I'll give you 8 anna. It means half a rupee.
That's a lot of money.
Said, a lot of money. So I hearted it, I remember. And then I recited it. He was very happy. He gave me a car. Then he gave me a book about the biography of the Prophet, which was written for the children. And I read that and was highly fascinated. I was highly fascinated by the angels coming and the miracles and the triumphs and the wars and the horses. I could see that world. Then he gave me another eye. And he said, I'll give you 1 rupee if you remember. As he was making the deal with me, my totally illiterate grandmother lost her temper on her husband. And she said that you have no right to do this. Today his mother is dead. His father is underground because Communist Party is banned. So this boy is living in our house. Does it give us the right to impose a religion on him? Do you think his mother would have taught him this? Or his father would have taught him this? We have no right to do that.
It's amazing.
And this was the end of my religious education. I did not, as a matter, I was deprived of 1 rupee, so I did not like Islam at all. But after many years, one day I remembered this incident and I realized that, look, this illiterate woman who could not even sign, this illiterate woman who would worship thunder, lightning, or rain, pray 5 times a day, had this kind of objectivity and large-heartedness. And we look at these educated people of today and look at their mindset and look at what small minds and small hearts they have.
That's amazing. So, Javed Sahab, you've spoken of your grandmother, but your mother died when she was 8 years old. But in an earlier...
She was not 8 years old.
No, I said when you were... Sorry, did I say she?
Yeah.
So sorry.
Yeah.
So when you were 8 years old.
Yeah.
Sorry. And you once earlier have shared some memories of her, which were beautiful, So will you describe to us what kind of person she was? And you once said that she was very unique for her time because she was perhaps the first graduate in MA of her generation.
Yes. She was the first person in her district, Rudauli, first girl who graduated. Like her father, like my maternal grandfather, was the first young man from Rudauli who had become a graduate, BA. So some of her, we used to live in Lucknow in civil lines. And some relatives came from Rudauli, from the village. Rudauli is perhaps 70, 80 miles away from Lucknow. My Nana had his kheti badi there. His land was there. And they had a big house also. He was a zamindar. So they came and they did not know where is our house. They knew it is a civil line, but they didn't know exactly where the house is. So they were looking around and they asked some people, सुनिए उनका घर कहाँ है जिनकी बेटी ने बीए किया? So they told them. So they recognized. And so this is the incident. That gentleman's house whose daughter has graduated. This was a very big thing. So the whole area knew about it in Lucknow, civil life. So
what are your tactile memories of her? Who was she as a person?
Well, my brother, who is a psychoanalyst, so I'm quoting him, he says that most probably our mother was a wannabe Hindu. A psychoanalyst opinion, not mine. So, because she, mostly she used to wear sari, she would put a bindi always. And one dangerous thing, she had one murti of Krishna.
Wow.
So, this was that she was a highly educated person. She had a strange record, a rare record that in middle, in metric, in FA, in BA, in MA, in BA. Throughout her career, she was a gold medalist. Extremely popular. I'll know because she died when I was 8. But till I was 20, I kept on meeting women who were her students, and they would hug me and they will cry and they will tell me stories about her. So she was an extremely popular person. And she has written a lot about literature because that was her subject, Urdu literature, about poetry, about novels.
But just coming back to, as I was saying, I wanted to understand what went into this molding of you. That intellectually, so she introduced you to Urdu literature, but being communist, you once told me that
It was there. It was.
she would read to you.
Yeah, it was in the air. I was breathing that. It was through some osmosis, these values of secularism or leftist. Now, I'm not a communist today, but if you once have really believed in communism, there are two things with the remnants that remains with you, whether you remain a communist or not. One, a strong sense of justice, that if the downtrodden, if the weaker section is being exploited, repressed, you feel that. Two, a strong sense of secularism. If you are a communist, then I think it's very difficult to become communist.
But Javed Sahab, when you're speaking about Stalin and today the criticism of communists and whether those was that, there was such, apocalyptic cruelty both in China and Russia, and there was no intellectual acknowledgement, criticism. It was a God delusion in the same way,
That's true. That's true. See, for us in my childhood, I remember Stalin was like some kind of a god. And then you realize that God had feet of clay, even
he was killing 50 million people just as you were worshipping him.
Yeah, that's true. But you have to realize, understand it, and accept it. So that is another lesson. You see, that is what went wrong with, I think, communism. You see, we should not say that we are against religion. We should say we are against faith. And that has communism, at least in India, it has turned into a faith. And that was not right. You see, you may like Marxism. You may like that ideas. You may like that thought. First of all, you have to synthesize those ideas with Indian history, Indian culture, Indian tradition. You had to Indianize it, which did not happen. We kept praising Lenin and Stalin and Engels and so on. So our heroes were somewhere else. And as if this communism has nothing to do with the history. As a social justice, the idea of social justice was never in India. The idea of secularism was never in India. Look at Akbar, 500 years old. Europe had not heard this word secularism that time. But here we were working on it.
Yeah. And even prior, I think that's the kind of proud history. If we are going to have a renaissance or a revival, it should be those proud strands that even pre-Akbar or Ashoka or Chandragupta Maurya, that the fact that this was a society which was like such an ocean of influences and that intellectual muscle and just the excitement of plurality.
And you like the great movement, Buddhism, which is pre-Christianity. Buddhism, again, what was that? Buddhism is a big dream when it started. It was a big dream of a fair society with every person's dignity and equality. Exactly. The basis, if you see, you forget everything. But see, so what is the base?
Social construct, yeah. But Javed Sahab, let me bring you back to your mother. I really wanted to, so you spoke about her achievements, but what was she in relation to you? What was you had her for a very short time, but what are the memories you have of her? You actually once told me that she literally taught you the alphabet. She would carve them out, share those stories with the audience.
Yeah, yeah. I started reading Urdu when I was about 5 or 6. I started reading novels when I was about 7 or 8. Or by the time I was 13, I had read many novels which I understood to some extent, I did not. And later I understood what I had read. Like I very clearly remember that I was 13 because my birthday had come in between while I was reading Maxim Gorky's Mother. So I think 13 is a bit too small an age to read Maxim Gorky's Mother, but I did. So I used to read this kind of literature, and thanks to my mother. I remember when I was in KG in Bhopal, she was teaching in Hamidiyya College. I was in Cambridge school. And every day when my bus would drop me home and I would come up, she was reading a fat Russian novel, in English, of course. And she would tell me the story of one chapter. And when I would come out of the school and sit in the bus, I would be thinking that, all right, so that boy had reached that factory where he has to put the bomb in the Nazi factory, but will he be able to do it? Let's see what happens now. It is like TV serial. So then I would reach home and run up the staircase, and then I would ask my mother, then what happened? So the first thing before I eat something, I would listen to the next chapter. So that is how, she must have, there was a girl also, so she must have edited all the romantic scenes and made it very asexual.
Shabana's always complained that you're the least romantic man on earth,
Because of that novel. Because my mother edited all those scenes.
Your mother edited out the romance.
Yeah. So a 6-year-old boy heard that complete novel, or maybe the average version of it, whatever. And then when she was teaching me Urdu, she herself taught me. There was no Urdu in my school. She taught me. And then she wrote a letter to her husband. And how do I know about those letters? Because all her letters that she had written to her husband were ultimately, after her death, were published as a book. Because when my father read those letters and he had kept each one of them, he suddenly realized that there is a certain literary value of this letter. And those letters become, more often than not, they were not together, thanks to Telangana. So when I met one of the ministers of Telangana, I spoke to him about it, that you owe me a lot. He said, why? Yes, my father's party was banned because of Telangana movement, and because of the ban of the party, my father was underground. My mother was looking after me and my brother alone. So you owe me something. He laughed a lot. So, because she had written those letters, and they are available in today. So I was reading those letters one day, and I said, in one letter, she wrote, what is plastic? I heard something like plastic has come to Bombay, and it's a very unusual material. So can you send me some plastic? I would like to see it. Now, this I read in the book, but I have a very good memory. I remember that plastic reaching Bhopal. And it was a small packet, and he had sent a small sheet of plastic, which was perhaps slightly bigger than what you put on the dining table. What is that called?
Like a table mat.
Yeah, table mat. So it was slightly bigger than a table mat, and it was light gray, very good color, silver gray. And two of her students were also with her, and all these three ladies were extremely curious about it in this age, so flexible and so on. But they were scared that because it is not cloth, so can it catch fire? So they cut scissors, the small part. And I was feeling very bad, why are they cutting it? It's such a beautiful thing. But they did, and they burned it and saw that. But anyway, they realized that you can't make a t-shirt for the boy with this. It's not possible. So ultimately, that plastic was used to make a bag.
To make a?
Bag. So she made a bag, but obviously the plastic couldn't give them any material to make a handle. So they took some woolen thing or whatever. They made a bag that handle with some other material. And now we used to get a lot of magazines. So she would cut 2-letter words, 3-letter words, not very complicated words, and in block letters. And she would stick to them on a cardboard and put them in the bag. So the bag was full of perhaps 100 or 150 or how many words, Urdu words. And when I would come, she would play this game with me that she put her hand in the bag, take out a block and ask me to read it. So this is how I developed my vocabulary or facility for reading. And then she used to get me a lot of books. I knew my father is a very well-known poet. I know that my maternal uncle, Majaz, was a very important poet. So somehow there was a great glamour of poetry in my mind before knowing what is exactly poetry. But I started learning poetry and reading and listening and remembering them by heart from the age of 10 perhaps. So by the time I was 13, 14, I remember thousands of couplets. Thousands. I could recite poetry for a couple of hours at least.
Wow.
Other people's poetry.
So in fact, you were called, I've been told that you were called Jadoo because already at a very young age, you're going to now of course be humble, but you were very prodigious and you were seen to be a prodigious child like already when you were very young. So or has anyone told you like what's the first prodigious thing that you did?
There is only one prodigious child in the world.
That's
and
you.
Every mother has that child. So let's not take it very seriously. But my name Jadoo is not because I was prodigious or magical. When I was born in Gwalior. Because my father was teaching in now it is called Mahalakshmi by college. That time it was before independence, it was Victoria College. And one of his students, you must have heard his name, Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So they were his students. And Mrs. Kaul, who was the adoptive family of Vajpayee ji, she was also a student of my father. So as a matter of fact, she was my babysitter. When my mother would go somewhere, she would call her husband's student.
Sadly, that's not going to protect you from the wrath of the BJP today.
Yeah. Oh, she did many times. And so did he, as a matter. So
you were talking about how
I was born in the hospital, and my father's friends came to congratulate him. So they had come from Communist Party office. And one of them had Communist Manifesto in his hand. So somebody asked, "Bhai, Muslims have a tradition. We have heard that Muslims, when the child is born, they do some adhan in his ear. So what are you going to do?" So he looked around, so he saw that Communist Manifesto. He took the manifesto and he recited the manifesto in my ear. "Workers of all the nations unite, for you have nothing to lose but your chains." So on. तो ये पहले मेरे कान में गया था. Then somebody asked कि इसका नाम क्या रखोगे? भाई नाम तो तुम बच्चे का कुछ करो. So somebody said that when you two got married, he had written a poem, and there was a line, "लम्हा लम्हा किसी जादू का फसाना होगा." तो जादू का फसाना तो अभी यही होगा, लम्हा लम्हा. तो अब तुम, why don't you call him Jadoo? So everybody laughed and मेरा नाम जादू हो गया. So my name is Javed was kept because of Jadoo. Generally your pet name comes out of your name. My name has come out of my pet name.
So Javed Sahab, your mother played a huge role in actually, even subliminally, in your intellectual development. Your father, as you said, was like a really iconic poet, really well known. But you have a very fractured relationship with your father, both emotionally and intellectually. So why did that happen? Can you describe him? What sort of a man was he?
I had lost my childhood autograph book. And in 1961-62. And last year, I found it. It's a long story. I'll tell you some other time. But I found it. And when I was turning the pages and looking whose autographs I had, big cricketers, film stars, all poets, writers, and so on. And my father's autograph was also there. I had taken my father's autograph in 1968. It means I was 15 years old. And he quoted a line of a famous 13th century Persian poet, Sadi Shirazi. He wrote one line of Persian, and obviously I didn't know Persian, so he translated it for me. And now I understand it. Har kas ke shud sahab nazar, deene budurga khush na kar. Every person who is a man of sight has never pleased his elders' faith. So when he himself gave me this suggestion, then I had to follow it. This advice had come directly from the father. Har kas ke shud sahab nazar, deene budurga khush na kar. Every person of sight has never pleased the beliefs or faith or religion of his elders. The faith, the deen, now deen is everything. It is knowledge, way of living, and religion. This word can be used for everything. He has not pleased her. So, but I will not blame him. I will not blame myself. These were the circumstances. You see, in the beginning, I was brought up in my maternal house. Then I lived with my maternal aunt. Then when, at the age of 15, when I said that I don't want to leave my family, I want to go to my father. So my father came and then he left me in Bhopal. And again, he did not take me with him because perhaps his circumstances didn't allow him to take me to Bombay. But what were the circumstances? There's no point in going into detail. So, till the age of 19, 20, I had never lived with my father. Never. Except my early childhood when I was 4 years or 5 years old or 6 years. And I would meet him once in a while, perhaps once in a year or maybe once in a 2 years. So my association was, more,
an idea of him.
More often there in my mind. That, okay, he's my father. But we never lived under the same roof after the age of 4 or 5. My age of 4 or 5. So that distance also creates a lot of misunderstandings and hurts and lack of trust and so on. Yeah. And when I was 16, I started living on my own with my friends. When I was college, I don't think my father even knew where I'm living.
I'm going to bring you to that phase, but just to understand your father, I mean, it's amazing that you're speaking of. I didn't know that he was literally an underground Marxist.
There was a time. I mean, that time till this party was banned.
Right. So, but he also, I think for many years you stopped writing poetry because there was a kind of reaction to your father, or I don't know.
No, I never stopped. I never started. And there were ample reasons for that. One, if son of a shopkeeper revolts and he wants to say that, no, I'm not just the son of somebody, I have my own identity, he will not sit in the shop, that's for sure. So I was also not sitting on the shop. I was not willing to sit on that shop. And the shop is poetry since last 7 generations. My 7 generations of writers and poets. So intentionally, I didn't want to start poetry. And by the time I was 15, I knew because I remember thousands of couplets. Dr. Rahim Masoom Raza has written in one of his articles that I have met 2 people in my life who have greatest memory for poetry. One is Sardar Jafri, another is Javed Akhtar. So I remember so much of poetry even today. And I knew that I can write in meter. I knew I understand the nuances of poetry, but I did not write poetry for 2-3 reasons. One, perhaps this revolt, and me myself. Another, if you don't know much about something, that you are more courageous. But if you know the nuances, if you know what masters have done, then you get very frightened and you don't want to assess yourself. So somewhere I had this fear also. Then 2-3 things happened. My younger brother, who is a year and a half younger, so we are almost equals, but he started writing poetry and he started writing very good poetry. with very modern sensibility and very uh, intelligent and emotional. It's a good combination I find in his poetry. So perhaps that also inspired me, that if he can, why can't I? And then I met some young writers, young poets, like there was a girl, unfortunately, she died at a very young age, Parveen Shakir, a major poet, major talent. And I met some young poets who wear jeans and t-shirts and writing good poetry. So in my mind, poetry was written by elders. Poetry was written by people who wear
Masters.
kurta pajama and sometimes eat pan and keep on smoking cigarettes. But when I saw these cool guys, like Parveen, like many other, like there was Jamal Ihsani, a poet, then few more, they were young and modern people. And they were poets. They changed my perception of poetry. Then meanwhile, my father passed away. तो अब दुकान पे भी कोई नहीं बैठा हुआ था. तो अब मैं अगर रिवोल्ट भी करूं तो किससे करूं? जिससे रिवोल्ट कर रहा था तो रहा ही नहीं. So then I started writing.
So do you have a regret? What does your psychoanalyst brother say about you and your relationship with your father? And now, when you look back, do you have regret that he didn't know that you turned out so beautiful?
It's very strange, and all of us must have experienced it. When we have some kind of relationship which is not very smooth and there are complications and intricacies, and when the person passes away, you do regret and you feel, I wish I said this to him. I wish I had done that for him. But believe me, we think that only because he's not there. Suppose he would have been there. It's not true only in my case, in many cases. As a matter of fact, in most of the cases. Then we would have remained like this. This regret is because of the demise of the person. So yes, sometimes I do feel that I should have forgotten many things. I should have been more forgiving, more large-hearted.
I love this uncompromising honesty. No bullshit, Javed Sahab, ever with you. That's great.
Yeah.
Even in something as nazuk as this, you're not willing to have humbug around it. So that's amazing.
But that is how life is. We regret afterwards. But suppose this person would have been there, then we would have remained the same.
You'd be in the
Then
same
wouldn't have
paradigm.
changed. Yeah.
So Javed Sahab, I know that you've constructed your personality as witty, acerbic. There's not even a molecule of self-pity in you. But there's been so much talk about the outsider, about the breaking in, about hardship now, even in Bollywood and actually in any context. And you were the quintessential outsider. When you broke into Bollywood, it was truly a story of hardship. What do you remember about it? Like, just give me an idea of maybe the darkest time. Everyone knows the broad strokes, that you lived on pavements, you lived in car, railway station, but be the storyteller. Tell us an anecdote that will make it come alive. What was that loneliness?
The way one should not be very proud or exceptionally proud or arrogant about his success, his achievement, and particularly his wealth, which is the cheapest thing to do. The same way one shouldn't be very arrogant or proud of his failures. You see, sometimes what happens is we take our hurts, our failures, our deprivation, turn them into measures, and we put those measures across our chest to, I had gone hungry. I was denied love. I was denied a shelter, and so on and so forth. As if we are the only one in the universe who have suffered this. As a matter of fact, whatever I have seen, it's a fact that minus losing a limb or my eyes or my teeth or my life or having cancer or some other fatal disease, I have experienced almost every calamity that one can face, living without residence, no postal address, no permanent address, not for days, for years. I have lived without food. I have lived without clothes. Which is so strange. And it was so funny when I was 18 years old, and that time I was in Bhopal. One day I realized that I have nothing to wear. Now, it is illogical. How is it possible? And I was finding it funny even at that time that you are 18 years old, you are living in this world. So how were you living? You had some clothes to wear. That is how you went out of the house. You are not going naked. Why you don't have any? But the last trousers that I had torn so much that it was not usable at all. So I had nothing to wear. I have experienced all these things. But the fact is that this is not a very exclusive or unusual experience. I know that millions and millions and millions of people are experiencing it at this moment when I am talking to you.
We saw it just now with the, what we call the migrant.
Yes, migrant. Yes. Sometimes I sit in my car, which is almost a luxury car with air conditioned, comfortable seats, radio and television within the car and everything, all the facility. And there is a chauffeur who's driving it. And in rush hour when I'm going, believe me, I look at the people. The crowd is moving on the pavement. They are walking, perhaps for the next bus stop, perhaps to reach the local station. And I seriously think, Shoma, I'm not saying it because it's a very dramatic or very effective thing to say, that am I to believe that each one of them who is walking on this pavement is less intelligent, less talent, and a lesser person than me? Why I'm sitting in this car and why this person is walking on those pavements? Tired, faceless, in the crowd. Why? Oh yes, of course, I have certain talent, I have certain capability, but that is not enough. Am I to believe that none of them, there are thousands of people, none of them have that talent, or any capability? That will be right. There's so many factors. Your talent, your attempt, the right moment, being at the right place at the right time. Other factors which help you. Some people who come in your life and they become some kind of a stepping stone and they send you up and so on. There are so many factors. So if you start believing that whatever life has given you or you have taken from life is strictly between you and your life, it's not true. There are so many factors. And you should always think that thank you life, thank you people, that it happened. It could not have happened also with same talent, same caliber. So that I think gives you a better perspective.
So
So talking about, now I'm coming back to it, talking about my deprivation sounds to me exactly like talking about my achievement. It looks like a show off. Aapko malum hai? Once I went hungry for 3 days. So many people have done it.
No, but
actually when we say this, that I used to sleep on the pavement, I'm not telling you that I used to sleep on the pavement. I am showing off that just see from where I have come and what journey I have taken. Now, where have I reached? Do you realize from where I have started? Look at the size of my achievement. That's what I'm saying.
No, I get that, Javed sir, but as I told you once, that I do want to put on record, and as a storyteller, you'll understand the importance of stories. You are, for circumstantially or not, you're a person of significance. So it's interesting to know the backstory, your gene intent. You don't believe in the spiritual, in the afterlife, in the consciousness. So in this finite life, at least, we should know everything about you, how your environment shaped you, the people who shaped you. So that's my intention, and you have given us 50 more, around 50 years of great pleasure. So we should at least know what went into the making of this.
See, I think at a very young age, you develop morality, some kind of morality. Now, morality not in narrow sense.
As a compass.
As a compass. And an incident and your morality together turn it into an experience. It is not only the incident. This incident may happen to some other people, and some other person will take some other conclusion, take out some other conclusion from it. Because बॉल तो फेंकी है, बॉल किस सरफेस पे गिरी है वो भी इक्वली इंपॉर्टेंट है. तो अच्छा सरफेस अगर अकेली तो बॉल के बिना होगा कुछ, तब भी कुछ नहीं होगा. तो इंसिडेंट एंड द रिसीवर, both of them are equally important, and between them the incident turns into experience. Incident is not an experience. What conclusion you have drawn from the incident is the experience. तो मुझे लगता है कि by the time I was 8-9 years old, that respect for women, अब मैंने कोई बैठ के एक दिन तय नहीं किया था start respecting women. I had to. My mother, my aunts, all of them are highly educated people, and they were working women. मैंने जिस घर में आँख खोला है, I've only seen working women. Not that one day decided, now we are liberated. No, they must have decided much before I was born. So they were working women. I have never seen their husband talking to them even a slightly rude tone. So this is the culture I had seen.
So you glossed over the fact that, you know, when your father actually, I don't know if it threw you out of the house or asked you to leave, you know, he had remarried, and you had in fact a very difficult relationship with your stepmother. She did not embrace you or adopt you, and you almost never speak of that, you know. So did you ever experience her? Is this part of your respect for women, or what is the, like?
You know, as a matter of fact, after so many years, when I look back, now I'm 75, and you're talking of something that happened when I was 19. So I can look at it objectively. I was also not the easiest child in the world, first of all. I was also a very naughty, very problematic child. I was a problematic child. So it was not that very easy for my stepmother also. She was also not normal. Neither was I. So both of us were, there was some distortion in both of us. So it had to happen what happened. So I don't blame her now. I think I was equally responsible.
But did you blame her for a while at least?
Oh yes, of course it happens. But I blame my father more than her. I mean, I had no right to blame her. But I had a right to accuse my father or whatever. But it doesn't matter now anymore.
It doesn't. I'm just going to linger 1 or 2 more minutes on this. You know, before we did this interview, I spoke to all your family members. I spoke to Shabana, Farhan, just to get some sense of who you were before we knew you as a public figure. And Shabana used a very interesting phrase. She said similarly that you don't like looking back at this period of tumult. But she said one phrase kind of sums up, you know, the loneliness and the kind of expediency through which you lived. That you once told her that if you're poor, you can't afford to be boring, you know. What did you mean by that? Like she said you were living by your wits. What did that mean?
अरे भाई, अब आप सारे काम तो आप नहीं कर सकते ना, कि गरीब भी आप ही होंगे और बोरिंग भी आप ही होंगे. Only a very rich person who can distribute so many favors and goodies can afford to be boring. They say a rich man joke is always funny, but a poor man joke has to be really very funny. So why would people
put up with you
or afford you or to help you or support you constantly? I mean, you can't only ask for pity. That's not possible. Pity, generally, people have a very small quota of pity. It gets exhausted. So I think I had some kind of sense of humor, which was generally appreciated. Somehow people were under the impression, my school boys, my college boys, that he's very intelligent. So that also gave me some faida. And from the age of 19 till I started earning, that was perhaps really started earning was 25. So these 9 years, I have been looked after by my different friends. I never took a small job.
You were like Gandhiji being looked after by the rich?
I had affluent friends, and some of them are affluent, some of them were not. But all of them very helpful, very helpful. When I joined film industry at the salary of 50 rupees per month, I did not have a place to sleep or wherever. They helped me. Many people helped me.
But Javed sir, the reason I'm excavating this is you said a very important thing, that circumstance or an incident has to collide with your compass, who you are, and that's what becomes experience. That's what makes it your experience. So you're not going to tell these stories, so I'm going to quickly say it. Like Shabana shared with me that what you just mentioned, that you once went almost 3-4 days, very, very cold, rainy night, absolutely without food, no prospects. That structurally, very often you didn't even think of breakfast because you didn't know where to get it. You had to work up your wit, visit someone for lunch. Sometimes out of pride, if people asked you, do you want food? You'd even pretend not to be hungry. And she shared a story with me about some relative of yours who stayed at your home and was going through a difficult circumstance. And you told Shabana and your household that don't ask him if he wants food. Ensure that he has food. So these are all kind of inklings of what you did go through. But what I want to ask you is that at that time, your mother was dead, you weren't in with your relations, you had no money, your father and you were estranged, and you were going through a very difficult time. What was giving you a sense of life force? Like, what made you feel you weren't religious, you didn't have faith? What got you through this? So that's the essence of Javed Akhtar then.
I can tell you, but you won't like me for it. I can tell you that. I mean, when I look at it, look back and think of it, I think it's foolish of me, but good that I was foolish enough. I had no doubt for a second that I'll make it. I had no doubt. Maybe because of my friends who used to praise me all the time and used to tell me you are a genius. Oh, you are so talented and so on. Thanks to them thanks for that praise or whatever. Or maybe I was born arrogant. Or maybe, you see, when your mother tells you and there are people around you when you're a kid that you are special, you are exceptional. So the child starts believing. If my mother is saying, why would she lie? If everybody say, my aunts, my uncles are telling me that I'm exceptional, then I have to be exceptional. They won't lie to me. So this belief was totally inherent in me. I had 100% confidence. It's only a matter of time. Who can stop me? Although now I feel it was stupid. It would happen. But that time, in my worst moment, when one day I went to a place, the producer owed me some money. I had done some ghostwriting. And that place was very far from where I used to live, at least 10 miles away. And when I reached there, the office was locked. And now I was left with 20 NP in my pocket because I thought I'll get the money there, so I'll have lunch and so on. And it was around 2. And I had only 20 NP and 10 miles away from the house. So I had 2 choices. Either with 20 NP, I buy a ticket which will reach me somewhere near that vicinity where I live, or eat something with that. So I decided to eat. So I bought chana of 20 MP, put it in my pocket and started walking. As I was crossing Dadar, which is an area in Bombay, and there used to be big mills there, and there was a particular mill which is now sold, but the gate is still there. So as I was crossing that gate, I thought that maybe all these buildings will not be there anymore after many years, but this factory will be here, and this gate will be here. And one day, now today, look at me, what a strange situation. As a man, I was amused that this is something to be remembered, because that will be the highlight one of these days. That I was walking with chana in my pocket and no money. And I have bought chana because I had only 20 NP. And I'll remember that.
You already had that sense.
Oh yeah.
You already were storing it as a cinematic moment.
Yeah. So can you imagine a man who is hungry, who is munching chana, walking 10 miles on his feet, and he had not eaten anything since morning, is fantasizing the day while doing it. One day when I'll be going in my car and I'll look at this game, this is the place. So ye to bahut acha ho gaya. Now this is a good memory that I should keep with me. That much optimism was with me. That's a fact. But now I'll tell you the tragic end of it. One day I was going with my daughter, who was that time perhaps 15 years old. And I was in my car. And suddenly I remembered, maybe because she was there, that is why I remembered, I don't know. So I told her, do you see this gate? And this is what had happened. She kept looking at me, and I thought that she may get tears in her eyes or hug me suddenly. Dad, what you have gone through. She kept looking and then asked me a question. उस जमाने में तो 20 में पैसे में बहुत चने मिल जाते होंगे. So this is the sympathy I got from my daughter. The story gets completed here. Huh?
But just now when you were telling me the story, I had another thought that you have just told us the wellspring of 70s Hindi cinema. You know, that quintessential classic Hindi cinema shot of the poor man walking, and one day he's going to be driving past in that. This is the wellspring of cinema.
Whenever I used to come across such moment, somewhere a part of my mind say, ये बहुत important moment है, it's an interesting moment. इसकी memory तुम रख लो, ये बाद में सुनाने वाला होगा, ये तो बाद में बहुत अच्छा. तो मतलब I had this much of belief, faith, that this is temporary, this shall pass, and of course I'll become successful. इसमें मुझे कोई doubt ही नहीं था, जबकि होना चाहिए.
I believe you once, again in one of these penniless nights when you were lying on a bench, was it Meena Kumari or Nargis, someone's trophies you held, and again had this cinematic moment of all the awards you were going to win.
I was working for Kamal Amrohi Sahab. Pakiza had stopped because they had parted. He was making some other film, and I was the fourth assistant or fifth assistant in that film. So since I had no place to live, I used to sleep in the compound of Kamal Studios, and ultimately somebody was kind enough to tell me that you can sleep in the costume room. So costume rooms had big almiras, lot of costumes and shoes and artificial jewelry of Pakiza and so on. So since I never used to have any money to go out and have tea in a restaurant or go and watch a movie or something, so I used to open drawers just in the evening to pass my time, look at different things, Pakiza's properties. One day I opened a drawer, it was full of sandals. In those sandals, I found 3 trophies. I took out, cleaned them, and I realized these are Meena Ji's Filmfare Awards. So I kept them out. However, since it was the costume room, it had a huge mirror. It became some kind of a drug for me, tranquilizer. I would come in the evening, close the door from inside, take that trophy in my hand, stand in front of the mirror, and fantasize that one day when I'll get this award and people will clap in the hall, how I'll wave my hand this way or this way. So उसकी मैं practice किया करता था. Filmfare trophy. The first trophy I have kept in my hand was Meena Kumari's trophy.
This one episode which I think is very interesting even for others and will resonate, that when one is going through a difficult time, Amir Khan once shared a story with me that he'd had a series of flops, almost 7, 8 or 9 flops in a row, and he was, like he said, he was sinking in a daldal, and at that time he promised himself that he would never again ever do a film that he didn't believe in. And Mahesh Bhatt offered him a script. Mahesh Bhatt was riding like the big super director at that time. And it would mean money, it would mean resurrection. And yet the script that Mahesh Bhatt offered him, he didn't like. And he said it's possibly the turning point in his life, the most difficult moment in his life, that at that moment he turned away from it. You had a similar moment during this very difficult time when you were offered 600 rupees, when you were eating chana for 2 annas. And you refused. So will you tell us about that?
I had started doing some ghost writing, and somehow people knew that I can write scenes, and particularly funny scenes, comedy scenes. One big, very well-known, established writer invited me, called me. And he said that I can offer you a job. If you write dialogue for me, and of course it will go under my name, I'll pay you 600 rupees per month. Now, 600 rupees per month were at that time for me like somebody offers me 6 crore rupees per month. Because I had not earned 200 rupees per month till then. Once in a while, I used to get 900 or 1,000 rupees for writing 10 scenes, 11 scenes. That is different. That is a kind of a windfall. But on a steady level, my highest salary till that time was in Navratna film Yaqeen, That was 175 rupees. So here is a man who is offering me 600 rupees per month. And all I had to do, sit down comfortably in his flat, which was his working place, and write scenes. What else I have to do? And it was extremely tempting because I had no money at all and I had to pay the rent of the room where I was living. So, but I felt that it is such a big salary that once I take it, I won't have the guts to leave this job because it will provide me such security. And I decided, come what may, I will not take this job. So I didn't go back to it. It was a major decision.
So, Javed Saab, you've had quite a fantastically, this is like a nice Hindi movie only, it's packed with intent. That you, soon after that, the really like the first, I would say, I don't know if it's the first really magical, fruitful, creative phase of your life was with Salim Saib, when you both were. So give us a sense of that friendship, that creative frisson. And, now that you're looking back and you're analyzing that, what did that very crucial creative friendship fall out over? What was its essence? And
I think I should not call it friendship. It was because he was my senior and he's almost 10 years older than me. And it was a kind of a relationship of an elder brother and a younger brother. Although the respect was mutual, but obviously he was senior and he was elder and he was the first person in the partnership. There's no doubt about it. And I have learned a lot from him, not only in screenplay writing, but in life. He was a very courageous person. He was a man of guts. He was not scared of anything, of what will happen if they don't give us work, what will happen if they refuse these terms and conditions. Somewhere, maybe in spite of all my resilience, in spite of all my self-respect and concept of dignity which I had brought from Lucknow or whatever, I did not have that kind of guts that he had. He taught me that. I learned it, but from him. When we were going for the first job, I told you, 600 rupees were big. Both of us were going for an interview in Sipti Films. And on a way, I asked him, suppose they give us the job in their story department, how much money we should have? He said, 1,000 rupees each, you 1,000. I said, what are you saying? I said, the man who had not had 200 rupees per month. What are you saying? Why would they give it? No, don't worry. Last for 1,000 take there. So this courage that both of us were totally jobless. But it was his idea and I was actually scared. Now, what is
Zada Gumption.
Zada Gumption. But we got 750 rupees thanks to that 1,000 demand. So for many years, we had this salary, 700 rupees per. Although they paid us later for script writing, for dialogue, for everything. But this 700 rupees, 750 check was permanent for us. So this had become a lucky charm for us. Like we wrote Andaz, which was a hit film. Then we wrote Hathi Mere Saathi, a major hit. Then we wrote Sita aur Geeta, unbelievably hit. Then Zanjeer, which is a blockbuster, and it was a new kind of film, and there was such praise and respect for the script. So after 4 big hits, we should have been very rich, and many people would have signed us. For 9 months, we couldn't sign a film.
Really?
I had bought a second-hand ambassador in 13,000 rupees. Ultimately, I had to sell it also. Because he said that now we will sign a film only in 2 lakhs. 2 lakhs, I mean, that time the highest paid writer was taking for 70,000, 80,000. He said, we'll sign the film in 2 lakhs, we will not sell less than that. We deserve 2 lakhs. And for 9 months, we were living on, but our minimum guarantee was 750. So, because of 750, we had this security. Chalo dekha jayega. And I trusted his judgment. Rather, very scared from inside, but I put my bet on him. And ultimately, we got 2 lakhs. So, his terms, his conditions, his dealing with the producer, and it is not only that this courage was in dealing commercially, in script writing. Many very strong strokes in the story, strong turns and twists of the story would come from him. Many of them.
Like give some.
Like if Gabbar cuts the arms of Thakur, that was his idea. So, that courage and thinking totally out of the box, देखा जाएगा, ये करो. वो उसमें भी था, script writing में. He had uncanny sense of this kind of thing. And that is what I had idea of detailing. I had that language, I had the privilege of language. Dialogue was my forte. तो वो अच्छा ये है, इसको सबसे खूबसूरती से कैसे पेश, लेकिन उसके अंदर मैटर भी तो चाहिए, सिर्फ डायलॉग की खूबसूरती से तो बात नहीं बन जाएगी. तो आई थिंक इट वाज अ वेरी गुड कॉम्बिनेशन दैट he had what I did not have, and I had what he did not have, and we became a perfect combination as far as the script writing is concerned. But he had some very dynamic understanding of script writing. And whatever I know of screenplay writing to a great extent, I have learned from him.
So, there's just so many creatives, like this kind of magical, synergetic, creative partnerships. And inevitably there's a fault line and it falls apart, And
fault line, wo ho jati hai. It is not one person's fault. Or, it happens. It happens particularly in this occasion. If you are partners in a cement factory, if you are partners in a stainless steel factory, then it can be very cold-blooded, very calculated. It can be very surgical kind of relationship. You are sharing the profit. You know how much you have bought, how much you're selling, how much expenditure of the production, and so on and so forth. So you don't have to be so emotionally or mentally close to each other as long as you are fair and accounts are perfect. But writing a script is intangible. You can't weigh or measure a scene. It is only in imagination, in mental repo, and total understanding and mutual confidence, and understanding of what the person is saying and why. The moment that repo, mental repo, breaks or weakens, then you can't function. And what happens that once you are successful, you have friends and you get different circles. In the beginning, you are partners who are spending perhaps 18 hours a day together. And then gradually what happens, then you don't sit in the evening, your pleasures and your leisure is not common. So gradually you grow apart. And when you grow apart, that repo is gone. What happens?
But so many people have suffered this, and it's possibly as painful as a marriage separation, this breaking apart of a creative partnership. And typically you've described this, but it can be because creative visions part, or also there's a kind of tussle of ego, Did that painfulness happen between the two of you, or was it just that you weren't chiming together anymore, or did it become a tussle for space,
Maybe to some extent, agar koi tussle space hogi, to it must be from my side, because he was the elder one, he was the number one in this partnership. So obviously number one will not have tussle for space, only the number two will have this problem. So that also must be a factor, and maybe it was. But ultimately, as long as that confidence, that love, that repo is there, everything is smaller, not that important, not that much in focus. The moment that thing becomes weaker, that repo becomes weaker, everything starts becoming weaker.
So now, in this stage of your lives, is that friendship at all? Are you all in touch? Is it intact? I've never heard you speak of, or is that like a closed chapter?
Arey bhai, itna important chapter of my life cannot be a closed chapter for me. But obviously now we are in different circles, different worlds, our concerns, our priorities, our lives have become totally different. But whenever we meet with great warmth, and great love. But obviously that time is gone
Yeah.
and you can't recall it. But you have to remember what all we had done together and what all we achieved together. And it was very, very mutual. And it was not possible without both of us.
Just one bit more insight before I move to something else, that when something like this breaks, you talked earlier about that dark period when you were filled with certitude about yourself. But when this partnership broke, did you have any anxiety, any sense of vulnerability, whether you could create magic alone? Your outward life has shown success, but did you feel
Now,
that?
let's be honest about it. The fact is that, yes, both of us wrote some successful films also. I mean, Mr. India was a very successful, Arjun or Betab, very successful films. But he has also a picture like Naam. But that magic, which happened when we were together, could never be repeated. None of us do it individually. But all right, who knows that if we would have been together, then it wouldn't have happened. If you ask me that if I have any regret that that chapter got over, no. I think it's a natural, logical end of that relationship. Now it's past, and it had to happen like this. And I don't feel that whatever happened should have been avoided. No. When I look at myself, whatever I have done in so many years, wherever I reach, I could only take this route alone. So since I have no problem with my present, I must accept my past.
So Javed Sahab, everything you've spoken about, it's one thing is very clear, that right through, you've always been like very sentient, very conscious, very aware of the moment you're at, where you're at, what you're experiencing, you're processing, and despite having this really alert mind, you went through 7-8 years of extreme alcoholism. You had a big problem with what brought you into drink, and how does a mind like yours also slip, and not be able to find those kind of guardrails? Can you help us understand your psychology at that time? And then how did you pull yourself out of it?
You see, I think there were many reasons. One, these two people, Salim Saab on one side and Hani on the side, was some kind of disciplinarian in my life. And I was scared of both of them to some extent. So they would keep me in certain limit. One after another, both of them were not in my life. So I was, in a way, shall I say, free of any conditioning. So then perhaps I left home, and I had certain guilt also that this marriage has failed. I've had guilt not only towards Honey, majorly towards Honey, then towards the children also, who were 11, 12 years old. And on one side, freedom and drinking, which was giving me pleasure. On the other side, there's guilt. So just to get over my guilt, I was doing something which was giving me pleasure. So that was a very seductive combination.
Combination.
Yeah. So,
a double drink.
Yeah. And so for almost 7-8 years, I really wasted my time and energy and humiliated my talent. Then Mr. Yash Chopra came in my life. Although we had written many films for him, and I had independently also written Mashal for him. And he asked me to write songs, which had happened when I was at the tail end of my partnership with Salim Saab. This song saved me. Because what happens is, in spite of the fact that I was drinking so much, song doesn't take that much to write. If you're writing a script, it is like running a marathon. And songwriting is like 100 yards. It is not that anybody can run 100 yards. That also needs a prowess, agility, and certain energy. But in a small spurt, so somehow in spite of drinking so much, I could get away in my songwriting. But my script writing got damaged. And songwriting became better and better with experience. And I was being paid well. It was easier. It would take much less time. And I could afford to find a lot of time to drink while writing the songs. In 91, somehow it dawned upon me that whatever I'm doing is not right. It is totally self-destructive and I should not do it. So I left drinking in 91, July 31st. And since then, I've never touched my tongue to alcohol. So it is a glass wall between me and my favorite drink.
So were you an obnoxious man while you were alcoholic?
Anybody who drinks a lot can be obnoxious once in a while. Maybe not always, but I think in my adult age, I have made all my mistakes after drinking. And I imagine that if I had not used to drink, if I was not a drinker, I was a teetotaler right from the beginning, I would have made any mistake. Sounds too good. So all my major mistakes were after alcohol.
So Javed Sahab, just I want to switch to some other people in your life. It's very interesting that in some ways, actually, it's women who've shaped you. You know, you spoke of your grandmother, your mother, and then I would assume Hani and Shabana, Zoya. These have been other very big,
very strong women.
Strong women in your life.
Yeah.
So give us some sense of Hani and you. You know, like what was that? What did she bring to your life? You know, what sort of a person was she in relation to you?
Both of us were quite immature. She was 19 and I was, when I married her, perhaps 27. So we are 7 years, 8 years different. But I was half mad. She was very mature and I was half mad because I had come from this traumatic times, just stepped out of the traumatic times when we married. So I was not a normal person. When I look at my behavior, when I think how I spend my life in those years, it was only the talent that saved me. And perhaps my partner, Salim sir, who disciplined me to some extent at least. So otherwise I would have gone totally haywire. Between these two people, I was controlled to a great extent. But the fact is that after a certain time, you realize that I have great respect for Hani as a person. She's a wonderful person. There is not an iota of dishonesty in her. Iota. She's a great friend of everybody. Whoever her friend is will vouch that she's a great friend. But there was nothing common. And at that time, when the first flush of success was over, and I was looking around, then my partnership was going down in a way on emotional or professional level. It was on its way down. So there was a kind of emptiness. There was some kind of disillusionment. There's a kind of feeling that, is that all? Is this the end? Up to this is the point, end of the road. Somehow, so many things were disturbing me. And I needed some major changes in my life and find a totally new pattern, a new syntax, new grammar. And that is what happened. So that is how that marriage went awry. But I think in this relationship, I'll say 80% is my responsibility that it failed and 20% of Hani. If I had the sensibility that I have today, perhaps it would have been different. But it's done. Now nothing, it can't be undone, not possible. But what has happened is that over the years, we have become very good friends, genuinely very good friends. But if at all in my whole life I have guilt towards any person to some extent, and particularly about certain incidents. I hope she doesn't remember them. So, is Honey. Honey is the only person I feel guilty about that relationship and the failure of that relationship, because I'm more responsible. And I was not a normal person. I was not a normal person. Yes, since I was talented, I was a good writer, so people would say that you are normal. It's not true. I got over so many problems, internal problems, my own, what you say, ghosts that were disturbing me over a period of time. But I had just come out of that traumatic time, and now I had the money to enjoy my frustration, to celebrate that frustration, that anger. I was a very angry person. Obviously, I was not angry with Honey, but I was not totally rational in relationships, and that went wrong.
And how did you negotiate that with your children? Did you even attempt to, or is your friendship more an adult?
It is not that I sat down and gave them some detailed explanation of what happened, how it happened. First of all, I mean, look at the decency. Honey could have prejudiced them against me, and she could have told them many things which were true. Not that she didn't have to lie much to paint me bad. So, but she didn't do it. Point one. Point two, you see there, I cared for him, and I didn't know that maybe our father used to drink a lot, but he loved us. And maybe our father was not as responsible and as a normal father. He did on Sundays, he did not take us to park, but he loved us always, and he was there whenever needed. Today, obviously, they have very, very good relations, but it has not happened in one day. With Honey, I mean, perhaps if I take 2-3 names in the world whom I'll trust totally, one will be Honey. But it has not happened overnight. I mean, obviously, there was a lot of bitterness in the beginning. But over a period of time, because she's a very good person, and I'm also not a bad person, and particularly after becoming teetotaler, I've become a much better person. So gradually everything changed. Those wounds felt, then things became more normal, more friendly, more confidence developed between us. And today she's a very, very close and very strong friend.
So, when I was telling you that I spoke to Farhan and Shabana and others about you, Farhan curiously has only one very strong memory of you as a father, was that you always wanted him to wear his slippers, and he said, if you speak to him, ask him why, because I have never understood why. So do you at all recall this?
I was not aware of it. But when he told me, I started thinking, I realized, oh God, it has something to do with my childhood. I was perhaps 5 or 6 years old, and one day I went out of the house on the road without wearing any slippers or shoes or anything. And that's the only time in my life that my father slapped me.
Slapped you?
Slapped me, 5 or 6 years old. He was very upset. How can you go on the road barefoot? So it must be that reason that it went in my head. Never go out of the house without slippers. So that must be the reason.
Coming back to your intellectual framework, one turns for solace at moments of great vulnerability. You lost your mother actually on your birthday, I'm told, on 17 January. And this January, Shabana...
No, she died on 18th. On 17th, I became 8, and on 18th, she died.
And this 7th, again, was it 18th January that Shabana had...
exactly, had that accident. I did not tell anybody, but when I was taking her in the ambulance, her face was covered with blood and she was unconscious. I was thinking of the date, and that was scaring me to an extent you can imagine.
So the reason I brought this up is that that's a moment of terrifying vulnerability, humility. So given the intellectual framework you have you ever inadvertently also turned for solace prayed as a slip of your character? Have you ever prayed? Did you pray for Shabana?
No. In my grown up, in my adult life, I have really not prayed. I have gone to religious places with some people because they insisted, and I have done whatever they were doing. But I mean, there was no emotional devotion involved in it at all. But one day I was discussing with somebody who's a religious person, and he asked me this question. They tell me honestly, when you're in a great problem and some calamity happens, something big, some tragedy falls on you, you don't think of God? So he was expecting that I'll say no. And he said, you are lying. So I decided I will not say that. I said, yes, I think of God that time. He said, so? I said, that doesn't prove anything. When I'm nervous and when I'm shocked, my mind doesn't work properly. I start stammering also. So what do you want me to do? Stammer all the time. And my mind, when mind doesn't work properly, I start thinking like you. So what do you think? That I should always think like you?
Not as an intellectual conceit. Tell me, what does a person like you, how do you negotiate death? How do you negotiate loss? Is it with a rational mind?
I believe that if there is some kind of a shocking incident, if there is some kind of a big calamity suddenly fallen on you, that is the only time in your life when you have to keep your mind totally cool, rational, logical, and objective. Rest of the time, when things are perfect, there is no problem. You can afford to be nervous. You can afford to be confused. You can afford to be careless, whatever. The only time your mind should function properly is when there is a serious problem. So you cannot allow yourself to be upset, confused, nervous, because this is the only time when your mind is really required. So where is the space for praying?
What I want to end on is that, the kind of stirring cinema that you have given us. And I remember always Shabana saying that, he writes this beautiful lyrical poetry, but he's very unromantic. So today on my show, say something, sums up what Shabana means in your life.
बहुत से मेरी poetry ऐसी है which is inspired by her. As a matter of fact, there is a complete poem titled Shabana in my second collection, Lava. But there is not time, so I'll only recite a share which I had written for her. Zaheen, you know what is the meaning of Zaheen? Zaheen means intelligent. Aziz means dear or close to heart. And खुशशक means good looking, जिसका शक्ल देख के आपको अच्छा लगे, खुशशक. तो शेर ये है, खुद शक्ल भी है वो, although she's beautiful, ये अलग बात है, मगर खुद शक्ल भी है वो, ये अलग बात है, मगर हमको ज़हीन लोग हमेशा अजीज थे. She is my best friend. She is my best friend. The rest of it comes afterwards.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.